Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle émission du format Super Friends. C'est dans cette émission qu'on va à la rencontre des personnes qui font vivre la pop culture et la culture comics par leur travail. Et on est ravis, quelques jours après le festival d'Angoulême, de recevoir une autrice avec nous qui a été invitée par les éditions Bliss pour la sortie de son premier album qui s'appelle en français Planchette, Sorcière Culinaire, en VO c'est Unfamiliar. Nous avons donc le plaisir d'avoir l'autrice Hayley Newsome avec nous dans cette émission pour une interview qui sera évidemment en anglais. Le générique se lance et puis on se retrouve avec l'autrice. So this is really a pleasure to have you here, Hayley Newsome, in our podcast. Thank you for giving me a little bit of your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So since it's the first time we speak together, we have to start by the very, very basic question. Who are you, Hayley? Where do you come from?
So I am an illustrator and cartoonist from Los Angeles. I grew up originally in a small farming town in Idaho, but I've lived a bunch of places and ended up in California. And I'm also a YouTuber. Yeah.
Okay. But let's start with YouTube because I checked it was like 8 years ago that you started your YouTube channel.
Yes.
So and you started with you were doing videos about art, about drawing. What did you want to do with that?
Honestly, at first it was really it was a hobby for me. I used to watch a lot of art content when I was younger and a lot of it wasn't really encouraging. So I started wanting to spread a lot of advice I was getting in art school for free online and just making little tutorials and things. I never really expected it to become such a huge thing. I probably wouldn't have used a Pokemon pun as my username if it was going to be a professional thing, but here we are.
And you were also giving advices, but also just trying to make designs. So and you just mentioned that you were also taking art lessons. So I guess it was also maybe a way to teach people that couldn't afford to either the money or the time to be in art school.
Yes, the cost of art school was kind of on the top of my mind. I had always wanted to go to some schools like SCAD or CalArts, these big American schools, but I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and I just simply couldn't do it. It's why I went to school in Canada. But yeah, it got me thinking about how, I was getting all this great advice, but there were so many people who couldn't even afford to do what I did. And I thought it would be nice to share a bit of that. And yes, also it was kind of nice to get to do something kind of fun and cartoony and in my own style, because there wasn't a lot of that in the early days of art school.
And since you took art lessons, I guess you wanted from a very young age to be an artist, or was it something that arrived later?
Yeah, I was always very passionate about it. I originally just wanted to be a novelist. For me, art has always been sort of a vehicle to tell stories, but I got really passionate about art around when I was 13 years old. And ever since I was just wholly fixated on it. I didn't want anything else.
And can you tell us a little bit of what you were reading?
Oh, yes. So I was hugely into manga. It was very influential to me. There were tons and tons of different manga artists I really admired. I also was interested in the indie comic scene, particularly Jonan Vasquez, who eventually made Invader Zim, but originally made kind of really weird comics like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, just, things that are really scratchy and look very hand-drawn. I was very inspired by that.
So you were not reading mainstream comic books or even indie comics from Image or Dark Horse. That's not your time.
Not really. I was. I think I really enjoyed how in both manga and some of these really indie comics, there was so much focus on the face and the eyes and the internal experience of the characters. I find that a lot of Marvel comics and more mainstream American comics, everything's very zoomed out. And I liked how we were so close to the characters in some of these other styles of comic making.
So you started on Tapas with Unfamiliar, which is a platform for posting comics online. Why did you choose digital comics?
Honestly, I had been doing webcomics for a long time. I had some really terrible ones on a extremely old and now defunct website called Smack Jeeves.
So you're not showing them anymore?
Well, the whole site got taken down, so luckily I'm safe. I have revisited it on my YouTube channel a couple of times just to, have a little nostalgia. But yeah, I mean, I think I really loved the internet. I love that it allowed you to kind of create your own little niche communities. And I didn't know if anyone would like my comics, so it was kind of fun to just see, just put it out there for free rather than trying to like get it published right away.
And was it also maybe a way just to have some like a portfolio directly to show people also like, here's my website, here is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You can have a look.
Yeah. On Tapas, especially in the old days, it used to be called Tapastic. There was a really big community, like people would be on the forums and everything. And, you'd just be showing each other what you're so passionate about. And there's a lot of really experimental stuff on there. So I kind of just wanted to be a part of that scene.
And you started by drawing a page per day?
No, it took me a long time to get it even started, really, because I was in art school and I was also working at the same time. It was very slow. Like every free minute I had, I was trying to add like a little something, but I initially built up a little buffer and started releasing it one day at a time just to try to keep myself, on the front page for as long as possible. And then the editor of Tapas actually reached out to me and said, hey, if you compile these 5 pages into a chapter, we will feature you. And that's kind of one of the things that really helped it, do well very early.
So can you tell me a little bit about the origins of the project, how Planchette came to be?
Oh, yeah. So I think for me, Planchette was a character and a world and idea that I really just like needed at that time in art school. It was very difficult for me at first, I think, adjusting. And I think my real life story of like being an artist and going to art school is very similar to how Planchette, she's very confident in her magic and her abilities until she goes to a world where everyone has magic. It's kind of like that with art school, you're the best artist in your little town and then you go and you're surrounded in talent and it's very overwhelming. And
so you were confronted with all the other artists and
yes,
it was difficult for you to find your place also, or?
Yeah. And you just, you start to worry like, am I really good enough to be here? It's the first time you really get challenged in any meaningful way. So yeah, I think that was a big part of it. I also just really enjoy like stories about ghosts and I often sympathize with them. So I like the idea of having a story where they get a little time to like resolve their problems rather than just being like banished,
So this is set in a world of witches. We know that witches are often used to speak about sorority or friendships. Mm-hmm. Is it also something also that you like? You wanted really to have a story with witches characters but also sirens and mythical creature, let's say.
Yes, I think I was really trying to make stories about female friendships and relationships because originally I never drew female characters. I wasn't interested in them. I think I grew up on these like shonen battle anime and stuff, and all the female characters were so one dimensional. And I think I internalized a lot of that. And I was like, oh, girls aren't interesting, which is crazy to think as a girl yourself. But I think I was really trying to like push myself out of that and go really strongly in the other direction. And it was actually really like wonderful to write this story because I think it like kind of healed a lot of those bad misconceptions I had kind of subconsciously started to develop.
But when you created, for example, Opinion or Sein or Babs, was the idea of the character first, or did you have a story to tell and you had to create a character to tell such a story? How did it go?
So initially there was the episodic engine of the ghosts, like this idea. I like the idea that every ghost, would have a little self-contained story that could resolve. And then as for the characters, I had ideas for each of their arcs. So every character has something like profoundly that they want, or that's kind of wrong with them or makes them feel like they're not capable of fixing their problems. And then, I had an idea for each of them of how those arcs would resolve. So I kind of was working on both of those two paths at the same time with this, but the characters did come first.
And so, how do you make a good design? I guess you did a lot of videos about that.
Yeah, I mean, for Unfamiliar, my main focus was making sure that no matter how small they are or if they're in silhouette, that they always look different from each other. It's one of the things also that I think I used to get annoyed with mainstream comics. Like, characters would look really similar. They were all like in peak physical fitness and like, I don't know, they look a certain kind of way. And so I have all these, they have these really crazy, squishy, different body types, like Pinion's like super stretched out, and Planchette's got these big, thick tree trunk legs. And I don't know, I just wanted them to be really unique and have their own kind of energy at all times.
And in terms of outfits, did you have like references from other comics or video games, maybe animation?
Yeah, my inspiration for Planchette was informed by a lot of like Gothic Lolita, Harajuku fashion, like that cupcake shape in the skirt, as well as her puffy sleeves. I hid, little skulls on the side of her sleeves, which I think just works with her sort of Gothic look. And for Pinion, I just wanted her to look like a bird. Like, she has these long, skinny legs and then kind of this cape that puffs out with feathers, and stuff like that. I mean, I honestly wish I would reference even more with them, but I'm happy with how they turned out.
So how did it go in the long term to do Unfamiliar? Because there's like 349 pages now when the two volumes are combined. So how do you, like I say, it's like it's not a strength test, but like endurance, I'd say.
Oh, yes. It's more of a marathon than a sprint.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I had lots of periods where I wasn't making as many pages, lots of periods where I was making way more. I guess that's the benefit of doing the webcomic thing. You're kind of in charge of your own schedule. But, I do think that like this story benefited when I was making lots of pages close together. But yeah, I mean, it really was just a labor of love over a great number of years. That's the only reason I was able to get to this big, substantial amount.
And you were also using maybe your YouTube channel or your other social media to advertise the project, or still talk about it so people remember it exists? How do you also make it live in the mind of people?
Honestly, I've been so bad about that. Even on this tour, I've had people tell me, like, I was reading this comic for years and I didn't know you had a YouTube channel. And I've been on your YouTube channel and then I saw this in my school's library and I thought it looked like your style, but I didn't think you made a book. I'm the worst at self-promotion. It's something I'm actually trying to work on now. But yeah, I mean, occasionally I would bring it up on the channel and use it as something to do with the YouTube channel, mostly because I was trying to figure out a way to make a page and also make a video, at the same time. But yeah, I mean, honestly, with webcomics, I think the secret is just to upload as much as you possibly can. Like, people really like consistent releases and don't want to have to wait for a super long time.
But do you think that it could be overwhelming also to have to post constantly?
Yes, it's a real balancing act because you don't want to burn yourself out. I honestly don't know how some of these like manga artists keep up with their schedules. It's pretty wild. I think a lot of webtoon artists are starting to hire people to do their coloring or do one part of the process or another. I know with Unfamiliar, especially towards those last few chapters, it was really difficult to do everything.
So speaking of just about techniques, so you're working digitally, right?
Yes.
Or you're not doing anything on paper?
No, I do concept work on paper, but I also sometimes like will do the thumbnailing, like the page layout on paper. Mm-hmm. I really like when I'm in the ideas phase to be on paper, but everything else, like as far as the finished page, is done digitally.
So what are you using? Is it Photoshop or Procreate or?
I use Procreate when I'm traveling and Clip Studio Paint when I'm at home. Clip Studio Paint is probably my favorite program, mainly because of the fill bucket tool is very intelligent and it was designed from the beginning to be a comics platform. So I think I really sense that while I'm working in it.
Would you say that you were born because I think you're younger than me, so I guess you were born in the digital age also, so it was easier to maybe for you to directly start drawing digitally compared to others that have to do it traditionally and then switch to digital?
Yeah, I was definitely at like that turning point where tablets were available, but they were quite expensive. So for a long time, I was buying screen tone. I was cutting it out, and trying to make like manga pages that way. But yeah, it changed everything. I remember the Christmas that I got my first tablet. My parents bought it for me. I sat in front of the family computer and drew for I think 10 hours straight because I had wanted it for so long and I was just obsessed. I was fixated. So yeah, that tablet ended up having a huge circle in the center where I wore through it completely. Yeah, it was a good age, I think, to be getting into digital art.
I really like also in Unfamiliar that there's no like so there are some kind of antagonists, but there's no like big quest for a villain to be defeated. It's really like you said before, maybe personal stories about the different characters. So you didn't want to go for the big for the big epic story. You tried really to concentrate maybe just on character. It's character driven.
Yes, I love characters, and I think the most interesting conflicts happen when like two good people just have different experiences or different wishes. I think, I love an epic story as a reader from time to time, but as a writer, I don't gravitate towards it at all.
And you're also using these characters to just speak also about common themes, I guess, like for example, Babs who don't like to be a siren and to attract the looks of people.
Yes.
So this is really also something you wanted to tell maybe for your readers also.
Yeah, the stories of Babs and Sein really ostensibly like being very fixated on how people perceive them, but in opposite ways, was important to me because I think especially like growing up as a teenage girl, you feel both of these things. Like you intensely start to, when you become, you're not a child anymore and you're becoming a teenager, you get looked at in a different way. And at first it's like very frightening. And that's something that I wanted to talk about in the comic. And, I hadn't seen it covered kind of in that way, that very like internal way before. I'm sure it's been done before, but it's something I wanted to discuss.
And is it something hard to balance when you have your story to tell, you have your themes, and you try to balance the themes versus story? Is it something that you find hard to do?
Honestly, no. I mean, a lot of the times I didn't even realize consciously what my themes were until I was writing. Like I was very lucky in that way where like, as I was writing it, I was like, oh, I'm like, this is what I'm thinking about when the story's coming to my mind. But yeah, I mean, luckily it was a very natural process. It made it difficult sometimes because I would be, as I'm writing sort of, it was hard to, rein myself in sometimes and like make sure that the chapters were like the same length and that sort of thing. But that lack of discipline also allowed me to like, I guess, reach deeper into my own mind than I otherwise could have probably.
In terms of writing, did you know at what point you would stop Unfamiliar? Was it or did you just go with the flow and then at some point you just decided that the stories were told?
Honestly, I didn't know. I felt like I could keep writing it forever. It was more a case of I was more and more realizing that I had grown up away from the problems that these characters have. It was becoming more and more remote to me as I became more of like a full adult and not like a young adult. And I realized that it would be best to at least put the story, to rest for a little while because I didn't want to be feigning the experiences that they were having. I wanted it to feel really authentic. And so I thought it would be better to set it down.
And did you feel the success that when it was published online, did you feel the success growing?
Yeah, I don't think I really understood how much it was succeeding or the value of it. Like it was just so personal to me and I loved it so much, but it wasn't until it was a physical object in the world that I started to be like, wow, this was a lot of work and like people are really liking this. I think it's easy to get numb to like internet comments, like good or bad. And so yeah, it kind of made it real to me when it became published in a different way.
So this might be bold for me to say like that, but do we become a real artist when there's something physical involved?
I mean, definitely. I think you're a real artist whenever you're creating anything. And, I think it's my own personal complex that caused me to make it feel not real. But I do think it becomes easier to understand in a traditional sense when you reach these benchmarks. But, you can doubt yourself no matter what you've achieved. So it's a temporary feeling of understanding. I think, it's important for artists and especially young artists to realize that anything you make, no matter how good or bad it is, like if you're creating something and adding something to the world, you are an artist, and that's like valuable. So, yeah.
Because it really feels to me that comics, it might be the only entertainment that can't be replaced by digital, not like video games or music or movies, because in the end we still want also to feel a book, to
Yes.
turn the pages. So I guess it was also really important. I don't know if you wanted to be published in paper form when you started Unfamiliar or not.
Yeah, it was my dream to be published in paper eventually, but I never planned for Unfamiliar to be that project. At its start, I didn't even name the files correctly. I didn't have them in a folder. So when the publisher was reaching out to me, they were like, "Oh, we need all the original files so we can print it." I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And I realized that like for many of the chapters, they were just named something random across multiple different computers. It took me like a month to find everything. So clearly I didn't plan for it to be a real book at first, but yeah, it is. I do think it's more enjoyable to read in a physical form, and I'll never get into the like scroll style because I just love composing pages, and I think you lose something there.
Okay, so what are you planning now?
I have another book that I'm just getting started working on. I've talked about it a little bit on the YouTube channel. I'm trying to incorporate it a little more this time. And it's for a slightly older audience, I would say. Still very witchy and dark, and has some cute things and some scary things. But yeah, it's I'm still in the page making process of that, and that will take some time.
Wouldn't you try to do something like in full horror? Because I could see with your design of ghosts and stuff that you could try to do something really, really scary.
Yeah, I'm trying to mix it more. So I'm trying to maintain a lot of the cuteness of my style, but there's real like violence and real shock and death in this next one, and I think it'll either make people be really put off, I don't know, or they'll maybe enjoy the juxtaposition. But I wanted to tell a story that had some real teeth, and I'm just excited to see where it goes at this point.
And I guess also that you also want to surprise your audience, that
Yes.
you don't want to be like typecasted as, okay, so Hayley's just doing the cute witches and stuff, and you want to prove that you can do something else.
Yes, exactly. I think my original plan for Unfamiliar was actually a little darker as well, and I kind of moved it to this lighter and lighter place over time. So this time I'm trying to stick really close to my original vision for the story, and I want it to have layers. So yeah.
All right. And so bonus question, we noticed Kiki is
Yes.
here in the book. Is it your favorite Hayao Miyazaki's movie?
My favorite Hayao Miyazaki movie is actually Princess Mononoke, but I love Kiki as well.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Hayley.
Of course. Thank you for having me.